Hey guys, how you going? Hope you're all doing very well. This evening I'm going to be doing another episode of my Shock to the Past series. For those of you who don't know, Shock to the Past are films from the 60s, 70s and 80s and how they shock audiences back then and how they shape up by today's standards. So today we're going to go back to 1967 to a film from the grandfather of Gore, Herschel Gordon Lewis, and this film is called The Gruesome Twosome. Now the Gruesome Twosome is about a mother and her adult disabled son who basically kill beautiful women for their hair because they sell them in a wig shop. Everyone wants to know where they get the beautiful hair from, but ultimately this is a secret that they need to keep. Now, as far as the Herschel Gordon Lewis catalogue is concerned, The Gruesome Twosome is one of the lesser known films, and so coming into my first experience, I was excited to actually see a movie that wasn't The Wizard of Gore and 2000 Maniacs that everyone goes on about. And so I didn't really have too much interest in this director because of the fact I knew exactly what to expect as far as really poor filmmaking is concerned, but I thought for this series I definitely have to start reviewing Herschel Gordon Lewis, and so I thought why not start with The Gruesome Twosome. So this is everything that you'd expect from a Herschel Gordon Lewis film. It's very, very badly made as far as production is concerned. The acting is deplorable, the sound is absolutely terrible, the script is absolutely terrible, and the way the story goes on I thought was actually very, very slow and meandering. It only goes for an hour or so, and it feels like it goes for 2 hours, and so that's ultimately an issue. But pushing that aside, Herschel Gordon Lewis is definitely the grandfather of gore, and he's a very important director for horror because he really paved the way for extremity. And so extreme films today may not have existed if it wasn't for Herschel Gordon Lewis. So in the 60s, you never hear about gore. You never see films that have really nasty graphic gore effects. It's all about real psychological stuff because directors didn't want to get their films banned. But Herschel Gordon Lewis really pushed the envelope. This is a filmmaker that use really nasty practical gore effects. Now, by today's standards, the gore does look a bit cheap, but you can understand that. It was low budget and it was 1960s, but I would still prefer gore effects like this over CGI gore effects. And so this is a director who really understood what it took to make a name for himself, to actually step aside from every other director and make a shadow of his own and actually create something that he knew that was specific to him. And what that was fantastic gore and really nasty effects. And so this is the director who was willing to push that boundary, willing to stick his neck out on the line and say, okay, I'm going to make films based on what I want. And so the limitations that Herschel Gordon Lewis faced in the 1960s is very interesting because it's the same limitations that extreme filmmakers face today. In that if you make a film that's barbaric, it's very, very ugly, you're not going to get funding from the studios. And so you have to make the most of what you've got. And so it's clear that Herschel Gordon Lewis put all of his time and attention and all of his money into the gore, and unfortunately a lot of the other aspects of what makes a good film are lacking. And so that's, by today's standards, you're not going to get funding from mega studios if they realise they can't really appeal to the masses. You're not going to attract the big name actors. And so as I said, you have to make the best of what you got, and I definitely feel as though Herschel Gordon Lewis made the best of what he's got. He didn't have great actors, he didn't have a great story, so how was he going to make a film that made him remembered? And the way he did that is through the nastiness. And that's what extreme cinema does. It hits you with nastiness, and it really plays its cards very intelligently because when films know their limitations, they can actually make very memorable experience. It doesn't necessarily have to be a great film, but definitely a movie that stands in the test of time because there's something memorable about them. And The Gruesome Twosome is very memorable because of the fact it has really nasty gore effects. And so he's not known as the grandfather of gore for nothing. The Gruesome Twosome is another example of how brutal this director was, and especially in the 1960s. I couldn't imagine watching this film in the 1960s because this is definitely something that I wouldn't be prepared for. And even by today's standards, it is very nasty because it does linger on the actual graphic deaths, and there are some laughable moments, but overall I thought it was really, really impressive in what he produced as far as gore is concerned, as far as pushing those boundaries and being as offensive as possible. But unfortunately, as I said, everything else is lacking. But if he didn't have the gore, then he really wouldn't have a movie and it really wouldn't have worked. So you have to have one thing that stands out, and the gore effects are definitely the thing that stands out for Herschel Gordon Lewis. And The Gruesome Twosome may not be a good movie, but I certainly felt as though there were moments that were very memorable. And so if you are a fan of this guy, or you are a student of gore cinema, Herschel Gordon Lewis is definitely a director I would recommend. As far as a story, acting, character development is concerned, it's non-existent. It's absolutely horrible. It's so bad that it's actually entertaining. But as I said, the gore effects is definitely the evolution of horror, and this is where it all started. And to see horror go from Herschel Gordon Lewis to where it is today, I definitely feel as though names like this are very important and deserve to be applauded. Alright guys, that's it for today's episode. Until next episode, keep watching movies and I'll see you later.